In 2025, I did a fair amount of traveling for a variety of reasons, collectively spending around 6 weeks in the UK, a week around Baltimore and Washington DC, taking a really short trip to Universal Hollywood again for Halloween Horror Nights, and finally ending with a week traveling through Minnesota and Wisconsin. Not all travel is theme park related, and some of it I didn't even mention, like Miami or St. Augustine. But I did manage to visit 8 parks that were new to me this year, and since that's actually fairly a lot, I thought it would be fun to throw together a video that ranks them all. This isn't the typical structured video essay that I would normally spend a lot of time writing and editing, but I at least wanted to have an end of the year video where I thank everyone who continues to watch this channel. I wouldn't be able to travel as often as I do without everyone who is interested in watching the videos, but it's also a big reason that I'm able to bring you more videos as well. For example, it wouldn't have made a lot of financial sense to travel to Six Flags America before it closed permanently this year, without continued support from everyone who watches. And hopefully in the future, I can take more trips focused specifically on theme parks and entertainment to continue diversifying the kind of videos I can bring you on the channel. I also want to thank everyone who subscribes as well. Before the summer, I made a Q&A video just to update everyone that I would be traveling in the UK for a month, and I asked people there to subscribe to see if they could get the channel to over 150,000. At the time that I made that video, I think that I was somewhere around 144,000 subscribers, but to my surprise, the channel has since grown to 171,000 now at the end of the year, and it's awesome to see that number continue growing. Sometimes when you watch another channel, I've seen other people ask their viewers to subscribe because maybe they're getting great views, but they also show that less than 1% of the people subscribed are actually watching their videos. For me, around 40% of people watching are subscribed, which I assume is actually pretty good for YouTube. So again, thank you to everyone who continues to support the channel by watching, even if every subject I cover isn't necessarily always what you're looking for. Finally, I made a community post around a few weeks ago, where I ran an experiment to see if I could get people to rewatch my theme parks and entertainment were better in the 90s video, to see if I could boost it back into the algorithm. If you missed it, I released it around a year ago as a 4-part series that grew way too large to be a single video, but then I re-released it as a single 3.5 hour long video as I intended it to be seen this summer, when I didn't have time to work on a video during my UK trip. If you somehow missed what someone else described as my magnum opus for the channel, I really recommend watching it, because for me personally, it's the most interesting video that I've ever written and edited together. However, if you have seen it and are watching this video, which will definitely get more reach than my community post, I want to continue the experiment. To be transparent, the end of the year is great for advertising revenue, as advertisers pay more. So if you want to support me by rewatching the 90s video, even if you just play it in the background, it would not only help me out, but I do actually want to see if it works as an experiment to see if a lot of extensive viewership boosts the video to a larger audience that might be interested in watching it, and seeing how, in the past, yeah, theme parks and entertainment really were a lot more interesting in that era. So, thank you again if you watch this channel often, and let's get right into ranking the parks that were new to me this year. As far as criteria goes, I'm going to be ranking these parks worst to best with numbered scores, and for me, the score depends on how well the park is balanced and is appealing to the demographic that it's designed for. As an example, while these parks aren't new to me, I can't compare something like Fun Spot Orlando, which is an amusement park with some notable coasters and flat rides, to something like Disneyland, which I think is the best park in the United States, both in terms of attraction balance and the strength of its theming. They're obviously catering to very different audiences, so I can't say that Fun Spot is lesser than Disneyland just because of its lack of theming, but I can judge it by how well it caters to its intended audience of Orlando locals and people who are staying at nearby hotels on International Drive. So, with that said, let's begin with the worst park that was new to me this year. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Fun Spot Kissimmee, which I think is meant to appeal to both locals and people who are staying right outside of Walt Disney World. It's the kind of tourist trap that would be attractive to people who go to those eye-catching stores that sell knockoff Disney t-shirts on Highway 192. Now, while I'm usually a fan of this kind of touristy kitsch, Fun Spot Kissimmee is essentially just a permanent carnival. If that's the kind of experience you're looking for, and maybe want to take young kids there to ride a handful of flat rides and get fried junk food, it might be worth it. But while this is definitely cheaper than the big theme parks around Orlando, as an unlimited ride pass here is $60, that still feels quite expensive for the ride selection. Granted, it does have 2 extensive go-kart tracks if you're looking for that experience, has an arcade, which honestly isn't anything special, and also hosts a sky coaster. However, its Orlando counterpart does have one as well, and if you're going to go to one, that's definitely the better park, if only because it has White Lightning, which is actually an excellent wooden coaster. In terms of notable coasters at Fun Spot Kissimmee, it has Galaxy Spin, a Zamperla Wild Mouse, which if you're a Disney fan, you might recognize as being the same exact model as Primeval Whirl from Dinoland USA. The other notable coaster here is Mind Blower, which is a Gravity Group hybrid wooden coaster with an inversion, which might look cool from the outside, but is notably rough in how it rattles you to concussion. I did make the statement that I was glad that Universal was tearing down Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit as the worst roller coaster in Florida, but a lot of people made the point to me that Mind Blower deserves that title. And yeah, you're right, because how could I have actually forgotten about how awful this experience was? Also, it makes a concerning screaming sound as the train blasts through the course. People have assured me that this is perfectly fine, and is the result of Rocky Mountain Construction coming in and modifying the track for a refurbishment, but I still don't necessarily trust the safety standards of the park. In my video from earlier this year, where I took a look at both Fun Spots as the sketchiest amusement parks around Orlando, a lot of people who were former employees confirmed with me that yes, the safety standards at these parks are quite lax, and shared their own concerning stories of working there. Other people in the comments tried to fight me on that, and accused me of being too Karen-y, or whatever, because I pointed out safety issues that I observed there, but I didn't make those observations without a bit of industry knowledge, and having known a person who had worked at the Orlando location who told me about how mismanaged these parks are. Also, speaking of unsafe situations, I unfortunately heard that Bumper the cat passed away a few months ago from the Kissimmee location, which thankfully seemed to be from age, and not because the park operated with the cat in the ride envelope as I witnessed the park doing. If you want to learn more about my experience with this park and its Orlando location, I recommend checking out that video that I already mentioned. But between what I think is an expensive price for go-karts, flat rides, and the worst roller coaster in the state of Florida, along with safety standards that I don't believe are anywhere near adequate, I would say that this park is just outright bad, and I would rate it as a 2 out of 10. Maybe you'll find value from go-karts or the fried food, but I just don't see a reason to come here unless it's for coaster credits, and even then, they're not exactly fun. At number 7, it's Six Flags America, located right outside of Washington, D.C., and unfortunately, has closed permanently as of this year, which is what drew me to this park. I had never been here and was curious what it was like in an underfunded park on the verge of death, as I would never get the chance to experience it again. What I encountered was quite interesting, as the park was a ghost town, but I also encountered an oddly aggressive employee who told me I couldn't take photos or video of closed attractions, and weirdly, while it's not a good park, that's because it was so badly mismanaged by Six Flags that it never grew into the popular park that it really should have been. Initially, when they took ownership, they relaunched the park with an American theme, and even had an interesting main street with decent theming for a Six Flags park, which actually seemed suspiciously similar to the cancelled Disney's America theme park that was supposed to open in Virginia. For being located in one of the largest metro areas of the US between Washington and Baltimore, this park never drew in the crowds that it should have because it never received any standout coasters. I experienced a notoriously rough Vekoma suspended looping coaster known as Professor Screamore's Skywinder, along with Roar, a GCI that rattles your teeth in what is one of my worst experiences with a wooden coaster. There was also Firebird, which is the only B&M coaster that I've ever disliked, although it does have some history as the first B&M ever produced, as it premiered as Iron Wolf in 1990 at Six Flags Great America before being located to this park in 2012. However, Six Flags America did have a highlight with the Wild One, which was okay as an experience, but was the oldest operating wooden coaster in the United States, as it was built in 1917. There is also a classic Premier launched coaster with Joker's Jinx, which was actually far more comfortable than I anticipated, and I hope that it gets relocated. I'm also disappointed to have missed Batwing, the last surviving Vekoma Flying Dutchman model, which was closed by the time I made it to the park, along with Superman Ride of Steel, an Intamin hypercoaster that seems like it would have been decent. What was strange about the park was that it just received a steampunk retheme to its western area in 2024, which means that Six Flags did not intend to close it until it merged with Cedar Fair, making it all the more disappointing that it closed. What makes this closure so unfortunate is that the park would have obviously been wildly successful if it had gotten some actual good coasters added to its lineup, which again is a testament to how poorly Six Flags mismanaged their properties prior to the merger. I even think that there was more potential here, as it had the solid bones for an actual theme park, and if a company like Herschend had purchased it, it might have actually been revived into something that could be a source of local pride to the area, like Dollywood or Silver Dollar City. So the question is, was Six Flags America a good park in the state that it was, assuming that all of its rides had been operating? In my opinion, I'm going to rank it as a 4 out of 10, because I think it was worth experiencing for some of its coaster credits, but ultimately, it's a lesson in lost potential, and how Six Flags threw away what could have easily been one of their most successful parks in the Six Flags chain. Coming in at number 6, I have Nickelodeon Universe at the Mall of America, and I might have to actually include this one as an honorary mention. Unfortunately, I wasn't feeling good the day I went here, and so I didn't ride anything, so I can only judge how I think the park fits its intended audience. While I think that the Mall of America is definitely a tourist destination, it certainly isn't reaching the heights that it did when it premiered in the 90s, and it seems like it serves locals in Minneapolis and St. Paul, or at least it was at the time that I was visiting in December. It's a good place to go to get out of the snow, and Nickelodeon Universe actually seems like the perfect day activity that can be padded by wandering the mall and experiencing some of its other attractions. The park itself has a surprisingly pleasant atmosphere, which I attribute to its real plant life, and the rockwork around the log flume, which is all left over from when it premiered as Knott's Camp Snoopy, but I can't say that the Nickelodeon theming was as garish as I thought it would be either. The park itself seems catered to families with younger children, as most rides are for really young kids, but it does have some notable thrilling standouts, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Skyfly, or coasters like Orange Streak, Avatar Airbender, the Fairly Odd Coaster, and SpongeBob SquarePants Rock Bottom Plunge, which I was really disappointed to have missed because I don't have a lot of experience with Kurzlauer coasters. From having not ridden anything, I can only judge that the park seems like it has a decent coaster lineup, and otherwise has great supplemental attractions for a broader family demographic that may be visiting the mall for other reasons. So I think that this tentatively should rank as a 6 out of 10, as a solid, pleasant little park. I would eventually like to make a trip back here specifically for this park though, because obviously, I didn't get the opportunity to give it the chance that I should have. At number 5, we have Thorpe Park outside of London, and while it's not spectacular, I did enjoy my time here. The park itself does have lightly themed areas, but the theming wasn't interesting or deep enough to really draw Thorpe out of the amusement park categorization for me, so I viewed it instead as a destination with some notable coasters. Some I really didn't like, including Colossus, which was uncomfortable and tedious with its 5 consecutive Heartline rolls, and Saw the Ride, which actually had decent and intriguing theming, but had an awful and painful layout. Other coasters like Stealth, the indoor Walking Dead coaster, and the Swarm were all decent, but very re-rideable experiences that I thought were great. The park of course stood out with Nemesis Inferno, which I controversially preferred over Nemesis at Alton Towers, and then there's Hyperia, which might be the most intense coaster experience I've ever had through its sustained Gs. In retrospect, I probably should have had some food before hopping on Hyperia first thing in the morning, which likely contributed to the excessive intensity, but it's still a world-class standout that I would specifically go back to the park for. The UK unfortunately doesn't get a lot of theme park investment, so I thought that Thorpe was a great coaster park in a pleasant environment with plenty of great supplemental attractions. I'm still mixed on if Ghost Train is a good ride or not, as in, I'm not sure if its audacious campiness saves it from what is otherwise an underwhelming experience, but I did find it funny, so I'll put it in the so bad it's good category, and I would probably queue for it again if I returned. At the end, I feel that the park is a solid 7 out of 10, and I think that it really could benefit by evolving into the UK's coaster park by continuing to invest in projects on the level of Hyperia. At 4th, I want to place Alton Towers, which a lot of people really thought that I hated because I was pretty critical of it. But no, this is still an excellent park. My largest issue with it is that it just feels stuck 20 years in the past, and for being Merlin's premier park in the UK, it feels mismanaged. For example, Oblivion has a significant place in attraction history as the world's first dive coaster when it premiered in 1998, but the industry has moved on, and I think that it needs to be more than just a one-trick pony. For example, after the coaster dives into the pit, it just abruptly ends, and I think that Alton Towers could really revive it by retracting the second half and putting in additional elements to extend the length of the ride. Alton Towers is limited in what they can do because they can't build attractions above the tree line, but I think that they could reasonably get creative with Oblivion's second half while still adhering to those restrictions. I also really enjoyed other coaster standouts like Galactica, Wicker Man, and notably Nemesis Reborn, which had a strong layout and excellent theming. I even enjoyed 13, which I had been told was more gimmick than substance, but I actually thought was a great family coaster with a cool theme. That said, I think I also failed to really communicate my thoughts on the themed dark rides effectively, which include Hex, Gangsta Granny, and the Curse at Alton Manor. None of them were bad, which I think people thought that I was criticizing them for being, but they just didn't really seem to live up to the potential that they could have. I enjoyed them casually, but they lacked the budget and finesse that could have elevated them into the strong dark rides you'll see at other European parks like Efteling or Europa Park. I think they still round out the Alton Towers experience, but left me wanting more from them. Also, I know that a lot of people really hate to hear this, but I just didn't find the Smiler to be a good coaster. Like Colossus, its focus on achieving a world record for the most inversions hurt the layout, trying to smash as much as it could into one tedious experience rather than focusing on pacing and comfortability. I think that Gerstlauer might partially be at fault here for the design of their trains, but I do think that hang time at Knott's Berry Farm is quite smooth, and that's partially why I was so disappointed to not get on Rock Bottom Plunge, because I wanted to give the manufacturer another chance. The Smiler had a really unique and interesting theme though, and that really extends to the rest of Alton Towers, which embraces either dark fantasy or a distinctly British bleakness that works in favor of the park. The actual grounds also make it the most beautiful park I've ever experienced, which unfortunately is juxtaposed with kids areas that embrace garish colors, or you even see it more recently with Toxicator, a new for 2025 topspin defined by its toxic green coloring as if it's right out of 2008. Looking at Tower Street, it's painted in a way that is very loud and brash, and having seen photo and video of what it used to look like, It just seems so unnecessary. Alton Towers is a park that I'm really mixed on, because while it has a lot of very strong highs with many of its coasters and landscaping, there are a lot of areas where it either seems to be going in a misguided direction or isn't getting meaningful investments like it should to become the world-class destination park that I hoped it would be. Ultimately, while I have a lot of negatives to point out, it's still a great park in many other aspects that I greatly enjoyed, and I have to go with a rating of 7 out of 10. I don't know if it's just a cultural difference, or if I just poorly conveyed how I felt about the park when I reviewed it, but a lot of people from the UK thought that I hated this park, and that's just not true. It just isn't being managed by Merlin in the way that it should, and hopefully with Universal building a new park in the UK, it drives investment into Alton Towers in a way that moves it into a positive direction. Coming in at number 3, I think that people might be surprised to see that I put Chessington World of Adventures up here. Part zoo and part family park, World of Adventures was just really pleasant and well themed, even if the majority of the ride lineup wasn't really intended for adults. I enjoyed seeing the animals in their various themed exhibits, and there were a few standout attractions that would make me want to return. While it does not reach the greatness of other safari attractions I've experienced in other parks, I did think that Zoofari was cute for what it was, and I enjoyed Room on the Broom: A Magical Journey, which was a walkthrough attraction meant for really young children, but was well executed and atmospheric. The park also had 2 notable dark rides, Tomb Blaster and the Gruffalo River Ride Adventure, both of which were also well done despite being geared towards a younger demographic. Unfortunately, I missed Dragon's Fury, which people told me was a great spinning coaster, but I very much enjoyed Mandrill Mayhem, a uniquely themed family wing coaster in the new Jumanji section of the park. The highlight for me though was Vampire, a suspended coaster that not only moved through a small but wonderfully themed Transylvanian area, but is a rare coaster model that happens to have really intriguing theming. There's not a lot of it, but I like how it glided through the forest and village, and of course, the station features an animatronic of the vampiric Viscount who slams away on the organ. Among the few standout attractions that elevate the park for me, the theming you experience by just walking around is just very well realized, and while very colorful, is applied tastefully. I just wanted to highlight this because it's an example of what Alton Towers could be with the right creative direction, although from what I've heard, the future of Chessington is controversial. While I thought that the Jumanji section of the park was relatively well done, a lot of people have met it with hostility because they think that IP lands are the wrong direction for the park to take. This will be followed in 2026 by a Paw Patrol land that people seem to be vocally against, and beyond that, there's rumors of a Minecraft land coming sometime later. I agree with the backlash against this, as I'm seeing a well-themed family park that is failing to invest in what are already great areas that make it unique, and is instead throwing in IP instead of trying to be something special. That being said, I felt that the Gruffalo River Adventure ride and Jumanji were competently put together, so at the very least, I hope that future investment in the park falls on the side of quality, even if the IP push feels relatively cheap. As I experienced it now in 2025 though, I would rate Chessington World of Adventures as a solid 7 out of 10. If Thorpe is the thrilling coaster park outside of London, this juxtaposes it as the nearby family-friendly kids park that I still found a lot of enjoyment in, even if I'm not the target demographic. Now in second place, I don't know if this is considered controversial in the UK, but I'm actually going to rank Blackpool Pleasure Beach over the 3 Merlin Run parks that I visited, because this really was spectacular. I understand the hesitation though. Blackpool is a town mired in poverty and crime, and the touristy promenade along the beach is seen as garish and tacky. That being said, I never felt unsafe, and when done right, I do love tourist kitsch, which Blackpool does well. making the town itself a destination I would really like to return to. However, Blackpool Pleasure Beach itself, while not perfect, still offered a lot that I found really appealing. I've always been fascinated by old Coney Island style parks from the early 20th century, and while they're all gone, at least in the form that they were, Pleasure Beach is instead a surviving emulation, which makes it incredibly unique. This park offered a lot of firsts for me, including Avalanche, my first and only experience with a bobsled coaster, which appeared to be disappearing quickly. Revolution is a classic aero looper with a rare flywheel launch, and Steeplechase is the last of its coaster model anywhere in the world. While not all the wooden coasters were open the day I went, they date back to either the 1920s or 30s, and I found some of the flat rides remarkable as well, such as Derby Racer, a surprisingly intense carousel that dates to 1959, or Sir Hiram Maxim's Flying Machine, which dates to 1904 and is currently the oldest operating ride in the world. While relatively more recent, I was also blown away by the big one, a 1994 Aero Hypercoaster that rises up and thrashes against the windy sea. While I've experienced taller and faster, the big one just has an unmatched presence that makes it feel like a classic in a way that I can't really describe. The park has a fair few dark rides as well, and while River Caves was unfortunately closed for what seems to be a reimagining, I was surprised by how much I enjoyed Alice in Wonderland and Wallace & Gromit's Thrill-O-Matic, both of which are very well done and charming. My personal favorite was Ghost Train, a 1930 ride system that leans into its campy horror and became a template for other similar attractions that have become standard at other seaside parks and traveling fairs. I also very much enjoyed Valhalla, a flume attraction notable for its Norse mythology theming that is among the world's most interesting dark rides. I know that I experienced it in a lesser state than how it premiered, as a lot of changes were made, and people consider the previous experience better, but it's still a worthy bucket list experience for me. I also see how other attractions have been closed and abandoned, like for example, a walk-through funhouse known as Noah's Ark, which just sits standing but not operating above the entrance, which would have been interesting to experience. When I produced my video that looked at the state of the park, a lot of people commented that they've really seen it decline, and are pretty angry that it has been mismanaged into something lesser than what it once was. But going into the park with little knowledge of what it used to be before learning about its history, I found it to be really strong, and is one of my favorite parks that I've ever experienced. For all of its issues, I still have to rate this as a very strong 8 out of 10, and is a far better park than it's given credit for, which I think is the result of the negative perception of Blackpool as a town, leading into how people see the park. At number 1, you know it was obviously going to be Epic Universe, because how could it not be? The park, while not perfect, is a creative triumph that the industry hasn't seen for a long time, and the longer you look, the more that the park reveals in terms of thematic detail. The overall product is best described as audacious, because there's so many areas where it goes above and beyond what you would expect, showing that a lot of love and care was put into this project that still continues to impress me, even though I've experienced the park a good handful of times. It's elements like the Burning Windmill in Darkmoor, the many animated figures of dragons found around Berk, or the advanced wand effects found throughout Wizarding Paris. While there are definitely issues with Universal's mobile ordering system, it has elevated the quality of the food across the resort, and especially at Epic, which has so many different restaurants that are wonderfully atmospheric and elevate their food through fun thematic presentation. The rides themselves are some of the strongest ever produced by Universal, with highlights including Donkey Kong, Mario Kart, Stardust Racers, Hiccup Swing Gliders, Battle at the Ministry, and Monsters Unchained. Of the dark rides located here, Universal has pushed thematic design and technology in a way that brings it to the top of the industry. And while I do think that Epic definitely needs more dark rides to balance the park out, the ones that currently opened with the park are some of the best you'll see anywhere in the themed industry. Epic isn't perfect though, and one of its major detractors is a lack of ride reliability, which has led to a lot of vocal outrage that has been amplified in the age of social media. However, that's just a natural part of the growing pains of any new theme park or attraction, and over time, the issues will be sorted out. So I think that if you're visiting within its first year of operation, you have to go in knowing that ride reliability will be a possible factor in the experience. There's also the issue of the park being completely overhyped, and people approaching it with sky-high expectations that it was never going to meet. It's certainly an incredible park, but as I discussed through my lengthy review, where I suggested that people should keep their expectations in check, the park still needs a lot of time to grow and expand into the complete experience that it should be, which Universal is apparently already in the early stages of working on. For every issue they can find at Epic, there is instead something astounding to counter it, whether through the intricate details and theming of the lands, or through the rides that really push the industry forward in unique and creative ways. I don't want to spend too much time on Epic, because I've now discussed it pretty thoroughly through other videos, but it was easily my #1 new theme park this year, and I'm going to conclude with a rating of a 9 out of 10. This year, I did a lot of traveling that often wasn't theme park related, but I was still able to fit in quite a lot that was new to me. I experienced many attractions that were self-contained and were interesting in their own right, ranging from actual rides and experiences located in cities, to themed shops, and to immersive exhibits located in museums. 2025 offered a lot outside of just the theme parks, but I feel that visiting 8 of them that were new to me will open new doors for the channel to continue diversifying the kind of videos that I can bring you. For example, Blackpool Pleasure Beach has a fairly large area themed to Nickelodeon, and along with Nickelodeon Universe at the Mall of America, I can see a video on Nickelodeon theme parks shaping up for sometime next year. In April, I'll be traveling to New York City, and I know that there's another Nickelodeon Universe at the American Dream Mall close by, so while I like bringing you videos about Disney and Universal pretty often, my traveling does allow for more unique or interesting subjects that I hope to continue bringing you. At the end of this, I hope you found my ranking of 8 new theme parks that were new to me this year to be interesting, and as always, if you want to help me out, you can leave a like on this video to help boost its reach. I also want to thank the many subscribers who have stuck with me throughout the year, and if you haven't yet subscribed and hit the bell notification yet either, you can also do so now to be alerted to new videos as they're released.